Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. And now here I am at the Q Code podcast today. Oh, I believe that this is Travis, Alan, and Danny.
Wow, how were you able to whip up such clever lyrics so quickly? Really impressed.
I thought you were doing an echo with
It
Travis.
was literally off the top of my head.
With Travis.
But welcome everybody into the Q Code podcast. If you cannot figure out what we may be, at least topic-wise, talking about, well, then probably you were born after the year 1990. Would you guys agree?
No.
That
was a really haphazard year.
2000.
After 2010.
Okay,
No.
2000.
Well, Trav, you said your kid.
Yeah. My son knows who they are.
I think it's the most timeless band of all time, so I'm not entirely sure that there's any year that you could give them. Maybe if you were born in the year like 1961.
Maybe if you were born.
No, you died in that year.
Yesterday.
I was gonna say, well, if you were born in 61, you were probably.
I know. I had to revert back. You died that year in 61, and you don't know who the Beatles are.
People in the Civil War didn't know.
Maybe if you were born in the Revolutionary War.
Honestly,
Revolutionary War.
If you had like no parents, who would teach you about them?
I think even then they're hard to escape.
You could say
I
that
don't know
about
that
anything. If you had no parents, who would teach you how to eat?
I think you picked the worst example there. It's like something that happens naturally.
Fine. If you had no parents,
I mean, like,
who would teach you how to shave?
softball would be, if you had no parents, you wouldn't be born.
Okay, I think you need to go ahead and start rolling us into the next.
All right. So
You were like
obviously
futuristic
today
clown.
we are talking about the Beatles, and there's one large conspiracy, which this is something I didn't know, but off of my brief kind of research looking at a few things about this, apparently this is like the first rock and roll band conspiracy. And then since then kind of like was the catalyst to blow up to a bunch of other rock and roll band conspiracies over the years. But this was the first. So if you want the OG conspiracy.
It's not only the first, it's the biggest.
Even bigger than Elvis?
The biggest and the first. Like I said.
The first, the
What
best,
was Elvis?
the only.
But yeah, so we're going to be getting into that. But before we get into that, of course, it's the Q Code podcast. We have to have some kind of a ease in because for some reason we feel like we just don't know how to talk long enough on it. Anyway, so we decided, Trav asked us all the question, what artist or band influenced you as a child? Now, this is a very open-ended question. As far as, I'm not sure what he means by influence you as in the band you became, influence you as in like the things you liked, influence you as in, I mean, there's a lot of ways to be influenced. So what do you mean specifically?
Leave it to you to take an easy question and make it very, very difficult. It's like, pick a band that has influenced you in any way, that whether it be negative or positive. Just take a look at, we're talking about the Beatles. I think that most people who have been influenced by the Beatles could say that it's positive. I made mention in our chat earlier that I just believe that they're a timeless band that, like, my son, who's 4 years old, has grown up from essentially a fetus listening to the Beatles because we would listen to it. We'd listen to Hey Jude all the time, and naturally when he was a baby and we'd put him to sleep, we'd play Hey Jude. And now when he gets upset or he feels sad or something, he always asks us to play Hey Jude, or he'll go to Alexa and he'll ask Alexa to play Hey Jude to put himself to sleep. So it's just, I mean, that song, that band has influenced him in a way, and he's only 4 years old. So
How
what
did
are
he
kind of ended a
know?
little sad. He'll ask
What?
Alexa when he's all alone.
I didn't say when he's all alone.
Didn't you?
No.
I thought you said when he's all alone, he'll ask Alexa to play it.
No, I said he'll come and ask us, or he'll go ask Alexa to play Hey Jude. He doesn't have to be alone to do it. In fact, he does it quite often while we're listening to other music, and he'll just go and stop it and play Hey Jude. So
You ever sing it to him?
yes, all the time. In fact, my wife sang it to him tonight. So
Is he confused what his
You
name
want to sing
is?
it for us?
he's not. He's not confused. So by that, you know, and like I told you, Danny, I know Trav and I know, and Alan, I mean, we grew up with you. So we know that you had a CD case, several CD cases, chock full with albums.
Goo Goo Dolls.
Goo Goo Dolls, Third Eye Blind,
Corn.
Limp Biscuit,
Matchbox 20.
Matchbox 20, Guano Apes.
Dave Matthews Band.
All of these bands who have influenced you some way or another. All I'm just asking is you to pick one
I like
and
how
tell
we
us
say, like,
why.
So-
everyone thinks that Danny has the worst taste now. We're like, Dave Matthews Band, Corn, Guano Apes. It's just like all the worst possible bands that you could have named from that time period just all rolled. Backstreet Boys.
Well, each of those has influenced me in their own way, for sure. Picking one, though, that's the difficult part. But there are. Do you want me to go first, or do you guys want to
Go first. Where the spotlight's pointed on you now. So
Way to put
But
the
it's
pressure
a
on.
warm up, so you got to go brief. You can't
All right.
elaborate your life history.
So it all began in 1882.
1882.
I said 1982.
Oh,
I'm not 137. Yeah, but like Trav said, Guano Apes was this weird band that I found. I projected that they would be the next big thing. They were.
they weren't.
And then I believe after Guano Apes, I projected Stained would be the next big thing. They were. But yeah, like there was one like
I'm
Everclear.
pretty sure it was
the
this
1990s.
that
What?
projected Stain to be the next big thing. It wasn't you.
Or Fred Durst.
Yeah, Fred Durst.
Well, no, I told Fred Durst you should get the Stained band involved, and because he was looking for somebody to sponsor. But no, like Everclear. Do you guys remember Everclear?
I love Everclear. That one, I do love that band.
Yeah. So they had this song called "Father of Mine," and that one kind of like my anthem for a long time because I was kicked out of my house when I was like 18 or 19. That's when, if you guys want to know, go back to our Toys episode. That's when I didn't get a Christmas.
If you guys want to hear the rest of this sad story, visit our Toys episode.
It's like, it's getting all somber. Well, I don't know, like, I mean, yes, if you listen to the Toy episode, but we laugh about this time in your life so much.
I know, it was like the most depressing time of my life, but
Hey, if you can't laugh at it.
like I got kicked out, I got dumped, and I lost my job, like all in the same week. And I remember Trav's mom. Trav's mom was really nice. She came up to me and said, you know, Danny, it's been a rough week for you, but bad things happen in threes. All three have already happened. Things can only get better from here.
Did my mom say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Was it true, or did another bad thing happen?
Yeah, I mean, other things, bad things happened in my life.
Well, I didn't mean
But-
in your life. I just meant like around that time period. I know other bad things happen in your life.
No, it was pretty true because after that, I started picking up the pieces and things got a little bit better. But yeah, like influence, like tons of different music. It influences your emotions and your mood. So I can't like just say like, oh, specifically only this one band, this one singer. There was different ones at different times. Even freaking Nickelback has its place, even though I know it's Trav's favorite band.
Look at this graph.
Graph.
So, okay, if you haven't seen it, go to
Oh,
YouTube,
I have
just
seen
type in "look at this graph."
I think you sent it to me, actually.
I did, because it's the funniest 3 seconds of my life. Look at this graph.
But Trav, who was the that was it Disturbed? That was like down with the sickness.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Cool.
Well, I mean,
Thanks for sharing.
Cool, man.
Some anger management issues.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, let's move on to somebody else because
So Danny chose Stained / Everclear / Fred Durst as his influence. So / Iguana Bats. So
and Disturbed. Don't forget Disturbed.
and Disturbed that he mentioned
And Nickelback.
half-heartedly near the end, and Nickelback. So great playlist from him. You can only wonder why his girlfriends broke up with him after she got that mixtape.
Alan, what about you?
Once you got kicked out of your house and you lost your job, what girl's gonna stay with you?
Oh damn, Alan!
That's cold.
Straight for the throat.
But luckily, after those 3 bad things happened, Trav Cole was there to help me film a Creed music video.
You're really not doing yourselves any favors. I really think you should pass the buck to somebody else now.
Was it? Can you take me home?
I just remember seeing the footage of. I remember being jealous that you guys went and did that without me, and then seeing the footage of Danny crying by a tree and being like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad I can go."
Did you have fake tears?
You did. We put like eye drops in there.
I put eye drops in my eye, but the only way to keep them in, and I think we might have talked about this before, but was to keep my head straight up. And then when I would say action, I'd move my head down so that it would drip. But I've noticed one thing. Each episode, I swear, Trav Mydell has a moment where he's like, I was jealous of this, but whatever. I was like, I'm good.
That's because there's so much of my childhood being jealous and then seeing the rewards of such an event and being like, yeah, I'm okay, actually.
So what about you, Al?
Oh, am I next?
Yeah.
I was gonna go with Beastie Boys.
Which one?
Yeah,
Intergalactic, planetary.
Because of the intergalactic song, and I'm obsessed with space. And I was like,
That's
no
not
idea.
true.
I didn't know that. Neat. Fun fact.
I do remember that you had their like anthology album.
Mm-hmm.
And I still look back at that time because that was like 90s or something, like late 90s. But I'm like, this is the Beastie Boys. How do they already have an anthology? Little did I know that they were early 80s.
Fooled you.
But, well,
your favorite
yeah,
song,
they have tons of good songs. The
They
Bobby
do.
Houston, Paul Revere,
Sing a little bit of Paul Revere.
Sabotage, huh?
no.
Sing a little bit of Paul Revere.
Now, here's a little story I got to tell about 3 bad brothers you know so well. It started way back in history with Ed Rock and CME White D. Pew, pew. What?
That's good. That's well done.
You in it. It's a low.
Danny and Ala just practice this at home. He's like, okay, well, when we go on the podcast, I'm going to ask you to sing. And I want you to bring me in so I could make my little laser sound.
But no, I remember I loved the Paul Revere song because when I finally got subwoofers in my car, it had that.
Well, I showed you the subwoofer.
It was a cool song. So mine, Danny alluded to this earlier before we press record. He's like, I know what yours is going to be. And I'll just be a little cliche. I think we've actually mentioned it before, but I'll just say Michael Jackson for me. I mean, I was,
Truth.
yeah, truth. It was so much so that, like, I didn't know how to listen to anything else. It was very difficult. Because I mean, all of his albums were already out. You know, he wasn't a new artist. And so I had all of them at my fingertips. I knew all the songs. And then once that was done, I was like, well, where do I go from here? And I didn't want to try to get into new bands because I didn't want to wait for their albums to get out. And so I tried to go back to some like oldies, ended up trying the Doobie Brothers. That wasn't great.
Hey, it was all right.
It was okay. They have a couple of songs.
Yeah.
Smoking doobies with my brothers. But anyway, Michael Jackson, I mean, to mine and Trav's, I mean, really all of ours, because I know that we all listen to it a lot, but Trav and I made music video after music video of Michael Jackson. But then we also did like the Beatles music videos and several other things. So, but yeah, I listened to that a lot.
You made me play Janet Jackson in that one music video, which I didn't find to be a very fair role.
Did he make you have like
it was the same dance.
No, but you wanted me to sing the Janet Jackson parts because you were singing the Michael parts. Yeah, scream.
Yeah,
scream.
Who has the higher voice though?
Well,
I definitely did.
Probably with Trav.
Actually, I think Michael has the higher voice.
I was gonna say, I think that paid off. Look, I'm just saying it would have been nice every once in a while to get it to do the not girl part. So
you got to be Paul McCartney in the girl.
Yeah, you were Michael Jackson though, who you liked. It worked for you.
I know, but I'm just saying you're not always the girl.
The doggone girl is mine.
I'm not that familiar with the Beatles. Was Paul McCartney like the coolest one, or I thought John Lennon was?
John Lennon was like, John Lennon's the cool one, Paul McCartney's the sweet one, George Harrison's the shy one, and Ringo is the
party guy.
No, he's like the young guy.
He was the funny one.
He was the funny one. Yeah, the funny one. He was the funny one. That's your. So John was cool.
If each Beatle were a Backstreet Boy, which Backstreet Boy would each Beatle be?
I have no clue.
If each Backstreet Boy was a Beatle, that's what you ask yourself. Beatle was a Backstreet Boy. Get out of here.
So,
is it my turn?
Beatles, when it first came out, was it originally a threesome and then they moved to add Ringo Starr? Or what? How did this?
No, they had another drummer. Trav, what's his name?
Pete. Pete Jones, Pete Moss. I can't remember what his name was. Pete something. Do you remember?
What? Yeah.
Quizzing me?
So was Ringo
no,
like
you would know.
Ghostbusters?
Beatles, Pete Woods, maybe? No, that's not it. Pete.
Yeah, they had another one.
Pete Best. His name was Pete Best. See, I was real close.
Didn't work out, or he left. I don't know what was what, but then they found Ringo.
There's a lot of bands like that have like some other guy. Like the Beach Boys had another guy too who like quit to become a dentist.
What?
And like, yeah, and he like was like, yeah, I'm never gonna make it in this band, and so I quit. And then it's like that's got to be like one of those situations where you sort of kick yourself. He did come back around though, actually. So. My turn. Okay, yep. I will say mine is the Austin Powers soundtrack. I'm actually kind of cheating a bit. It's not one band or one artist. It's the entire soundtrack to Austin Powers because it was the first CD I ever bought because I liked the movie so much and it inspired me to love the 60s. And then I basically dove into 1960s music from there and like never came out. So it
do you still like basically primarily listen to that kind of music?
No, I have taken the entire history of rock and roll at like an accelerated course. Like I started in the 60s in high school, and I've just been working my way into the 70s when Trav got into the Doobie Brothers, then into the
Smoking
80s.
doobies with my
And just
brothers.
like kept, and so now I listen to a lot of different stuff, but like I still have a strong love and passion for 60s rock and roll. So, and it all started with Austin Powers, which I think is funny because I think most of the songs on the album are not modern or are not 60s bands. There's a few that are, but I think a lot of them were like modern bands just trying to capture that 60s sound. But I was like,
Yeah.
I love 60s music. So
Like
yeah,
whatever.
that is an actual older song.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
There is one
good 60s.
older song that I remember being. I mean, it's probably like the first song I remember hearing ever in my life, and it's because my dad used to have this old LP of the Mamas and Papas, and so one song that just still has like a visceral, like emotional, like just like, oh yeah, I remember this song, is that all the leaves are brown,
California Dreamin'.
and the sky is gray.
I remember that. And didn't we love it because it was on that movie Congo?
Yep, and then that made me love the movie Congo too.
So there's
Full circle at that point. Taking you to life journey.
And then it made me love the movie Congo. Well, I'm glad something made you love the movie Congo, because that thing's trash.
Trav M, what decade was that? Da-na-na-na, splish splash, I was taking a bath.
50s?
I actually think it's probably early 60s. But like it would be like early 60s, like 61, 62.
Where like the
60s
50s were bleeding over into the 60s.
The 60s to me is the most interesting decade because if you listen to the music that started it and the music that ended it is so radically different. Like there was such dramatic change. Like no other decade has had that level of like woof, from like one type of sound, which is like splash, splash, I was taking a bath, to like Led Zeppelin, like shredding guitars and like just completely it like, and the Beatles actually, which we'll get into, like sort of embodied that because if you look at their like I Want to Hold Your Hand early stuff to their like final album in 69, it's like you take this whole journey with them and you see the entire like embodiment of history of 60s music change with them. Like they kind of led that charge. It's very fascinating.
Well, probably because like at the beginning of the 60s, you know, you just had like the regular like 50s America, but then by the end of the 60s, everybody was having sex and tripping on acid.
Well, it definitely helped. Yeah. So
Yep.
You
Well,
know,
perfect
draws
segue.
on the spot without some help from extracurricular activities, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
yeah, we do. It was the thing that Alan just said.
So,
All right.
well, let's
get
segue
to,
into this conspiracy then.
Woo!
It's
All
a
right.
good one.
As we both said that over each other at the same time.
Well, we were thinking the same thing then, Dan Kuhn.
Oh. No, it's
So-
totally. I think it's awesome. I just know from listening back to any of our Zoom recordings that with two of us speaking over each other, this is what the audience will hear. Blah, 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 blah.
That is also a good segue into my conspiracy. Because
That is a good segue.
because that's what a lot of the conspiracy is based on, is incoherent jabber-jawing.
Let's
So-
just raise our hand if we want to speak during Trav's conspiracy. We'll raise our hand and then Trav will call upon us.
So my conspiracy today has to do with the Beatles, but more specifically has to do with Paul McCartney. And that is the conspiracy that Paul McCartney is dead. You guys,
What?
have you heard of it? Like we talked about earlier, it is pretty much the original conspiracy / hoax in rock and roll history, but it also is is the biggest conspiracy. It's as I was going through this, and I did it in perfect Trav Cole fashion, where I didn't do a single bit of studying until about 3 hours ago. So, but that's what I do. I like to dive in and get it all right away. But I can tell you, as I was, it's just a weird thing that happened, and it actually gave me some goosebumps, some chills, kind of creepy in some parts.
Conspiracy itself, or like listening to the music, or what?
Listening to some of the things that were happening. Basically, I mean, if you know about it, you know that like a lot of it has to do with just theories based off of like taking some of their songs and their albums and playing them backwards and hearing words. And it's just when you hear them and it's on a vinyl, it all sounds so eerie and it's creepy. And especially with the words that are being said, it is super creepy. So
my wife asked me at dinner today, because she knew we were going to record a podcast. She said, "What are you going to record on today?" I said, "The Beatles." She's like, "The Beatles, like the band?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "What are you going to talk about the Beatles?" I said, "The conspiracy that Paul McCartney's dead." And she's like, "No, he's not. He's alive." Bull crap. And I'm like, "We're not talking about 2020. Like,
this is 1969 here that we're talking about." So
but even now, she thinks it's bull crap that he's still not dead. So
he is old.
So I think well, you'll get into it, Trav, but I think it's not that he's in the theory he's dead, but not like he's been replaced. So
yes, and that's the cool thing. And one of the more interesting things, that it wasn't just that he died. But so let me get to this. And this is an excerpt, and I forgot to write down, dang it, what the book is and the author. It's on my phone. But anyway.
we'll put it in the show. Trav will get me the book name, and I'll put it in the show notes for anybody who is.
I will get it. I will get the book, and because I'm going to throw all my references out there. But anyway, so in this book, the author writes this: Paul McCartney died on November 9th, 1966. He drove away from Abbey Road late the night before, a stupid bloody Tuesday, then blew his mind out in a car. He was officially pronounced dead on Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock. But the other Beatles decided to hush the news, so Wednesday morning's papers didn't come. Somehow they kept Paul's death a secret, replaced him with a look-alike, then dropped sly hints about the cover-up scam. So, I mean, that is the conspiracy in a nutshell, okay? Is that Paul McCartney died on November 9th, 1966, in a car crash. And that was kind of like right in the hype of Beatles mania. And they didn't want to ruin what they had. So they went out and got a look-alike and an imposter who apparently looked exactly like Paul, sounded exactly like Paul, acted exactly like Paul. Everything was exactly like Paul, but yet it was not Paul.
Same DNA as Paul.
What?
What's that famous saying?
What's the famous name?
No, the famous saying that's like, if it acts like a duck, it quacks like a duck.
It probably is a duck.
Duck.
Yeah. Trav.
A question or a statement. Isn't this around like the time with the Beatles when like actually Paul and they kind of started really changing the way they physically looked as well, like dropping a lot of the clean shave and like kind of getting like the beards in and becoming a lot. I always kind of like was under the assumption that was part of like the cover up was to keep their like look so dynamic that you couldn't really wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Like Paul didn't have a consistent look. And so if you would see him and you think, oh, he looks kind of different, you'd assume it's because he has a beard or long hair or whatever else.
Yeah, there was just a lot of things were kind of changing around that time. And so fans do what fans do. And there's a reason for why the conspiracies happened, but I'm going to leave that just for the whole sheer mystery of it. I'm going to, because if I tell you now, you're going to be like, lame. But if I, so
way to tell the end there, Trav.
I am going to wait till the end to tell you that, to ruin the whole thing. So, But anyway, so let's pretend for a second here that Paul McCartney did die. What does that mean if you look at the history of Paul McCartney after that time?
It means that someone else was just as talented as him.
Exactly. But
well, I think the argument could be made that somebody was more talented because there's been more successes after 1966 than before. Solely
so
because
that's the whole thing.
When he was a kid.
So
Travis,
if he died, huh?
Trav's raising his hand.
Oh, Trav, sorry, your hand disappeared in the background.
Oh yeah, I guess I got to keep an eye on that. I'll put it in front of my face. Well, I think too the other thing is like you'd have to wonder if what Paul McCartney's contributions were before, because it kind of that Lennon-McCartney dynamic that you have going all the way up, where they kind of would bounce back and forth the songs. If he died, but they kind of continued still putting out songs that sounded distinctly him. Either to Danny's point, they found someone who was really talented and could kind of continue that flow, or what Paul was contributing prior to the Beatles was for some reason being not portrayed accurately. That maybe John or Ringo or George or one of them was doing more, which sort of opens a can of worms a little bit as well.
But yeah, I mean, if you look at some of like the greatest songs, because something that you guys may not know, when you look at the songs, you can almost, or when you listen to the songs, you can almost tell who wrote them based on the lyrics alone. Because John was a little bit more creative. There were a lot of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Not innuendos.
Psychedelic.
I mean, there were, but just
abstract.
It was definitely abstract. That's not the word I'm looking for, but
terribles
is kind of what I was looking for. But so he would never say directly what he wanted. Dan Kuhn.
Is John the one that wrote "I Am the Walrus"?
Yes.
Okay.
But
that's
yeah. But Paul was a little bit more
poppy.
Yeah, he was poppy. You definitely could pretty much understand his lyrics and like what they meant. Pretty straightforward, and wasn't, not that he wasn't creative, but that just wasn't his style. And so if you look back at some of the more popular songs, like Blackbird, Hey Jude, I think later on, maybe I'm Amazed, that didn't he just write that solo, Trav?
That's with Wings.
That's with Wings. So
yeah,
he wouldn't have ever written those.
Yeah, by you.
What?
Maybe I'm amazed by you.
No, not that.
No, that's you. Put that Aerosmith.
The way you love me all the time. That one.
Maybe I'm afraid of the way I love you.
That one, yes. So, and that was when he formed the band Wings that he wrote that. He would have never done the whole famous clash with Yoko Ono. And not to mention, in 1997, Queen Elizabeth knighted him, Sir Paul McCartney. All of that would be another person. And which, if that's the case, the real question is was Paul McCartney really the right person to be on the Beatles in the first place if this other person did all that?
No.
Sounds like that person's the one that should have been on the Beatles the whole time.
Well, it kind of depends, though, because I think the Beatles, I mean, you're talking 66. They only lasted to 69. So
yeah,
at least from the Beatles run, the majority of hits came from, not the majority, but it's just purely time. There's been more on Paul McCartney's side than on his duplicates side.
That's true.
But if you factor in his entire life, including Wings and all that solo stuff,
mm-hmm.
Then you may have a case.
I will take that case.
The Beatles stopped after 69? Because I thought the Beatles went into the 70s, and then like in the 70s is when they got like really weird.
No, that's when they split
No,
up.
that's when they split up. They got really weird in like the 60s, the late
Wow.
60s.
When did they start then?
61 or 62. So they got big, and their first big show in the United States was the Ed Sullivan Show in 64. So in the United States, they got big in 64.
For some reason, I had it in my head that they spanned like 2 decades.
Nope.
Well, I mean, they had
Their solo acts. Like,
yeah, you have a lot of solo stuff from John and from Paul. Really, all of them had their own solo stuff.
like In Sync, and then you got Justin Timberlake solo.
But it would be like if all of NSYNC was Justin Timberlake and everyone went off and did amazing Justin Timberlake type things.
Yeah.
Except for Ringo. I mean, Ringo had some good songs, but he definitely was.
We're
not
going to
the
get
strongest.
into that in
But-
a little bit.
Wait, can I say one other thing too?
Yeah.
You probably don't remember this. Maybe you do. I just found out about it a few years ago. But have you remember the Dana Carvey show? It was like
Yeah.
on ABC. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did a documentary about it on Hulu, which is really funny. But anyway, one of the sketches, Dana Carvey's playing Ringo, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to do a song about crabs, and they told me we don't do song about ocean crustacean." 2 months later, Octopus's Garden comes out by Paul McCartney. That's how it was with the Beatles. Just telling you no, and it's stealing your idea. I found very funny. So
Actually, before I move on, that just reminds me of the Saturday Night Live skit with Chris Farley and Paul McCartney, and he's got him on that show, and Chris Farley is like the talk show host, but he's very nervous all the time, and he's like reading his cards. He's like, "We got Sir Paul McCartney on here, and Paul, do you remember like when you died?" And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I remember that conspiracy." And he's like, "Oh, cool." that was it. But so we've established the fact that in this conspiracy, if Paul was dead, somebody had to take his place. So who took his place?
I'm gonna guess.
I know you probably know because you read it. Trav probably knows. Alan probably doesn't.
We have Alan guess or
No.
you go ahead, Danny.
My guess
Go ahead.
is Justin Timberlake.
Okay.
Valiant
Close.
effort.
What's his name, Dan?
The guy who won. I have questions on this that maybe hopefully you guys can answer. But apparently, the Beatles ran some kind of look-alike contest, like a Beatle look-alike contest. This guy won as the most alike to Paul McCartney. His name is Billy Shears.
His name was William Campbell Shears, to be exact, born
Campbell?
September 14th, 1940. But even the results of that look-alike contest are part of the conspiracy. Because in reality,
was this conspiracy or was the look-alike contest supposed to take place before or after the car crash?
No, the look-alike contest. Oh, I don't know. I didn't actually. Actually, I do have the. Hold on, in my notes.
Because his car crash take place in.
It was right before. It was in 1965.
The look-alike.
The look-alike contest happened, but there was never an announced winner of the contest. So the fact that Billy Shears became a person of interest from that is kind of far-fetched. Because, Trav.
Is Billy Shears a real person? Like, is there a history to him that people can trace
Yes, there
back?
is. There is a history. In fact, I don't know if I want to talk about that yet, though.
Okay, you can save it.
I do, and if you want to talk about this later, but like I have like one huge underlining question to the whole Billy Shears saga or whatever. Like, So if you want to address it later, we can address it later. But I have,
Okay, well, let me get through to that point, which is actually more towards the end. But if I haven't answered that question,
okay.
either way, ask it, and so we know what the question was, because now I'm curious. But but yeah, just hold it until we get to the end, until I discuss Billy Shears in more of an in-depth. But I mean, it's interesting enough that they replaced they replaced Paul McCartney with Billy Shears. But the most interesting thing about this whole conspiracy is everything that the fans were able to find that seemed to be these hidden, just clues as to, how, not necessarily how it happened, but that it happened. And that the rest of the Beatles were acknowledging it in their music and in their album artwork. And I've jotted down a few. I think I have 6 or 7, but there are countless of them. It's amazing how many there are. So in some of the hidden theories, number one, and Alan, do you have the pictures that I sent you?
Yeah.
If you want to throw up, I don't know what order you have them in. I can't remember which order I sent them to you in. But for those, Dan Kuhn.
While he's pulling those up, I heard that
Next one now.
they said that when Paul McCartney was in that accident, he was decapitated.
Next. Oh, I didn't necessarily read that.
I was curious why they thought that.
Well, I can tell you what actually, in a little bit, I can tell you what actually happened in whatever accident they're assuming happened. But I don't know about the behead. I didn't know about the beheading.
I didn't know about the beheading either, because I thought it was that he blew his mind out in the car, like he just got into an accident and basically smashed his brains open.
Yeah.
He got in a car accident and was decapitated, but maybe it's just my source wasn't as good as your guys' sources.
Well, my source is my brain at the moment, so I wouldn't call super reliable.
Hang on. Is this a real picture of them?
Yeah.
Were they did Michael Jackson take his fashion cues from them?
Oh, Michael Jackson stole everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he
Michael
bought,
Jackson,
Including their music for a while.
including their music. Yeah.
Even little
And
boys'
still, but-
innocence?
Yes.
Okay, well,
That
I love how this podcast is also partially Alan discovering the Beatles for the first time. It's doubling as conspiracy / Alan learning about one of rock's most timeless bands. If these are the Beatles, this is what they looked like. I thought they ran for 3 decades and were beloved.
I really don't know anything about them.
Well, let me school you.
I do like the John Lennon song, Imagine all the people.
Imagine.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called.
That is a good song. It is a good song. So this isn't the actual album cover, but I chose this because it is pointing out what I wanted to talk about on this. But in Sgt. Pepper's album cover, it depicts the band. They're in front of a bunch of flowers. It says, I think, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or whatever. And so a lot of fans just assumed that they were at a funeral.
So
And
Al, will you pick up the picture, the Sgt. Pepper's picture I sent you?
oh, you sent it to him? Okay.
The what one?
I got your back, Trav.
Thanks,
Sgt.
dude.
Pepper, a really colorful red one with them standing in front of a drum.
Wow. Hang on.
Damn, Danny.
I need photos.
Send him. You already
Is that
passed it.
Back. There you go.
That one.
Oh, too far.
That
There
one.
you go.
Oh, it says Beatles. That's what it says.
What
And
is
it's
this?
Sgt. Pepper's.
Is this Captain Hook?
Can you zoom in just a little bit
Just-
more? Or
That's as
Don't
much
know
as it
about it.
goes.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know what your options were.
So they took a look at that, and for those of you listening to the audio portion of this, just Google Sgt. Pepper's album cover. But they just took a look at that and they just assumed, okay, I mean, it kind of does. It kind of looks like they could be at a funeral, but I don't necessarily see it. But so they that was one thing. Now, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about on that, Danny?
So, I mean, just little things like you said. There's people will find conspiracy or answers to their conspiracies if they're really looking for it, no matter what the conspiracy is. But on this one, things that I learned when I was looking at some stuff about it was apparently one of the men behind Paul McCartney. So one, if you can see, Paul McCartney is the one in blue. For anybody who's watching it, and for anybody who looks up the album cover, he's
Or
the
Alan,
one
who doesn't know.
And yeah, who doesn't know? all of the members are kind of looking toward him, so they call them the pallbearers. So that's the hint that he's actually dead, and the rest of them are the pallbearers at his funeral, where it says Beatles. Behind Paul McCartney, there is somebody that's behind him in the crowd that has their hand over his head. Apparently, that's a sign of death, like the death hand or something like that is what they call it. If you look down at the yellow flowers below the Beatles sign, it looks like it's supposed to be a guitar made out of flowers, but if you really stretch your imagination, I guess you can make the word Paul out of it. I still have a hard time seeing the word Paul there.
How?
People will see what they want to see, Alan.
Yeah,
They will. It's
definitely.
Like really stretch. It's like it starts off like with a small P and A, and then it gets to like a big UL or something. But the big one on the front of this cover, and Trav, if you were going to talk about it, stop me at any point if you want to bring it up. But if you bring up if you zoom into the picture of the drum, so I sent you just the drum itself, Alan, if you'll bring up that picture.
You're going to talk about the mirror?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Do you want to do it, Trav?
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
I didn't actually include that.
All right.
I knew it. But
look, this is the drum. This is a close-up of the drum that's standing in front of the Beatles on the album cover. And if you put a mirror up to the exact center of that drum, instead of it saying
Lonely Hearts.
Lonely Hearts, it turns into an 1-1. So like a Roman numeral 1 or the number 1, and then this word 1, and then IX, which stands for 9. So they would say, oh, he died on November 9th. So they're saying 1/1/11, so that's November, and then 9th. And then if you go to the next part, it says he died. So it says 1/1/9, he died. So that's like where they're trying to say, well, this is their cryptic way of saying that Paul McCartney died on November 9th. But a rebuttal to it is in England, the way they write their dates is not month to year like we do here. It's day, month, year. And so what it actually would say there is 9/11. He died.
What? Another conspiracy.
Oh, gosh.
So this conspiracy stretches decades, I'm telling you.
All right. I'll go
What does
back
it
to the
actually
one
say?
that I...
Lonely Heart?
Yeah, Lonely
Yeah.
Hearts.
If you go back to the other picture, you can see it, but...
Oh, okay.
But yeah, head back to the other picture that I had you at first, the close-up of all 4 of them. That one. And then if you can zoom in a little bit. Okay. So the big thing about this was that you see that thing that's circled there, and for those listening to the audio, there is a patch on Paul McCartney's left arm. And it's a little obscure. Like you can make out the first 2 letters of the acronym, which is OP, and they kind of you kind of make the assumption that it's OPD, which is the acronym for officially pronounced dead. So they take a look at that and they're like, holy crap, he's wearing a patch that says he's officially pronounced dead, not to mention all the other nonsense that we just went over. When in reality, that patch is from the Ontario Police Department, and it's actually OPP, so which is funny because I'm down with OPP. But it's Ontario Provincial Police is what it stands for. So it's just a patch. Sometimes a patch is a patch.
So were they big fans of Canadians?
I don't know. Maybe they just got their, uniforms mailed to them from Canada. I mean, if you think about it, those get-ups are about as ridiculous as a Mounties.
That's true. But like
Don't
I said,
insult the Mounties.
you look at this picture. So if anybody wants to bring it up, if you're just listening to this, but if you look at this picture, it does look from this specific picture it looks like it's the inside flap of the album or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It does look like it says OPD from just this picture, but there's a whole bunch of outtake pictures out there. And if you look at those pictures, you can clearly see in other pictures when he's just in a different position that it says OPP. So a little bit of you can find the bottom.
Yeah. Next, Al, if you could go back to. Okay, this one. So this is the back of the album. And so on the back there, it has, I believe that's like that's all the lyrics.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, behind the lyrics is the picture of them. And of course, all of them are facing forward while Paul is, of course, facing back, or with his back towards us. And then George's finger seems to be pointing to something. And it just so happens to be that George's finger is pointing to the words Wednesday morning at 5:00, which is supposedly when Paul was pronounced dead.
Mm.
So there is that. I don't really have anything on that, why, or like to debunk it.
Whose finger?
It's just George. George is the far left.
George Harrison.
This
George
one?
Harrison.
Yeah, so
Yes.
his finger right there is.
Wednesday morning. Okay.
So if you take this whole album as a whole, I guess if you take the front drum thing and you take that, then you could get the whole 11/9 Wednesday morning at 5:00.
Yeah.
All on the album.
I'm not saying that it would not be, because if I'm throwing myself back in the 60s, okay? Now, granted, the Paul McCartney was dead thing didn't start till 1969, but he supposedly died in 66. So all these people who are now jumping on this bandwagon in 1969 are going back to all of the albums and trying to figure it out at that point. And they're just coming up with stuff. But if I throw myself back there, this would be fairly compelling. I mean, he's pointing at 5:00 on Wednesday.
Yeah. That one is,
they're at a funeral. You put a mirror up to it and it says this.
Coincidences. Because I don't think there is any rhyme or reason. I think it just so happened to be that was the lyrics in that area of the album where he's at. But so that I never heard of like an actual like rebuttal as far as it's just like a complete, like, as far as anyone knows, a complete coincidence. But obviously if you're a conspiracy theorist, it looks like he's trying to point it out.
Yeah. And Al, if you want, I don't need the pictures for a minute. So next, you have the White Album, And Trav, do you remember? I mean, because I didn't write this down. Do you know when the White Album came out?
No, 67 maybe. Let me check. I'll check for you.
All right. So at the White Album,
68.
68, there's a track called Revolution Number 9.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the song, there's a voice that says number 9, number 9, number 9, just repeatedly. Apparently, if you play that vinyl, that song backwards, and at that point where that person's saying number 9, it sounds like you hear the words, "Turn me on, dead man." I don't know what that would mean.
I agree. I don't understand what that's supposed to mean either.
Turn me on, dead man.
Turn me on, dead man. And I'm sure and I didn't get into like very deep into what all these things mean, because that's just a rabbit hole that I could go down forever. But, you know, so I'm sure that when they listen to that, they're like, that's just another reason. Same album, in the spot between tracks, I'm So Tired and Blackbird.
My hand up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I had my head down.
Sorry.
What's up?
No, it's okay. I think that number 9, Turn Me On, Dead Man, that was what kicked it all off, right? Isn't that what was like on the DJ who played it backwards on the radio that started kind of the whole fad of this, like finding hidden messages and all that kind of stuff?
Well, you ruined the end there. Just kidding.
I didn't realize that was the end. I'm sorry, that was the beginning. So
it is essentially the beginning. Don't worry. Yes. Yeah, it was that's basically what happened was somebody called in 1969 to a radio station and said, "Hey, listen to this," you know, and somebody played it backwards, and that's what they heard. And so that's kind of what started this craze, and then everybody started listening to all songs backwards and looking at all meanings in every single album. In between the two tracks, I'm So Tired and Blackbird, if you play that backwards, you can hear John say, "Paul is dead, man. Miss him, miss him." That is where it got a little creepy for me, because it does sound like it, and it gave me chills. So, but
I agree, it does sound like it, but I only got to listen to it after which is classic, like, you know, putting something in your head.
It's like Ghost Hunters.
You hear what
Ghost Hunters. They'll be like, "You hear that? Listen," and they'll be like, and then they'll put down below like, "I'm coming for your soul," and you're like, "That's kind of similar, I guess."
I know. But I mean, because that happened the same thing with me, you know, like I was just watching a little YouTube video from the Rolling Stones. They did Rolling Stones magazine did just a little blip on it. It was a 5-minute video. And so it played a couple of those things. And they sound eerie, they sound creepy. But had I not known what it was supposed to say beforehand, I don't know if I would have known. I don't know if I could have just made that up or put those pieces together. At the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, you can hear John say, "I buried Paul." But when you look into it, and I guess it's been known that he didn't say "I buried Paul," he said cranberry sauce. So,
Question.
Alan has a question.
Yeah, Al.
So did you say, was there an actual car accident?
So, no, there was not an actual car accident. There was an accident, though. Paul McCartney was, and this actually kind of explains a little bit of the facial hair too, Trav. So Paul McCartney did have a little bit of an accident on a Vespa. And he crashed that and bruised his lip pretty bad. I saw the picture, and like he got a fat lip. And because he was so embarrassed about it, he just started growing a mustache to hopefully cover it up.
Which in like current day is the worst thing you could do. Like if you're like, I'm embarrassed on my upper lip, I better grow a mustache there.
I think like actually it left a scar.
It did.
Yeah, it's like that's. I mean, so that's why he ongoingly wanted to have some kind of facial hair or something.
That also kind of plays into the fact that like people would put up pictures of Paul McCartney next to Billy Shears and compare. And they're like, well, this one has this little scar on his lip, this one doesn't. But because Paul was so embarrassed about it, he didn't publicly say I crashed my Vespa. So, nobody really knew about that. Almost done here with these. In fact, this is the last one, but it's one of the biggest ones.
Really quick, along the car accident thing, though, his actual car was involved in an accident, but it was somebody else driving it at the time. And he was actually in a different car with Mick Jagger at that moment. So for what
I didn't read that.
That was my alibi too for when I ran into the back of that car down in Sandy. I was like, I wasn't there. Someone else driving my car. I was in the car with Mick Jagger. I don't know what to tell you, man. You gotta ask Mick, I guess.
All right, Al, if you want to throw up the one last picture that I sent you, which is the album cover for Abbey Road, which is the thing that I got behind me here, just not as artistic. But this is actually because Abbey Road came out in '69, right, Trav? This was their final album.
Yeah, the final one that was like full. They had like whatever had Long and Winding Road was the one that was like their final album, but this was the kind of last one that was like kind of compiled as such.
Yeah. So there are several things in here that, once everybody started, we'll put in air quotes, figuring things out. This was a major, like the epicenter of all of this too. So the theory here, as you can see, you have all four Beatles walking across the street, and you have John in the first spot, Ringo, Paul, then George in the rear. And as they looked at this, because they're all dressed differently, there's a couple of differences between all of them, and they just, the theory is that this is a funeral procession. And John Lennon, dressed all in white, is the preacher. Ringo, who is dressed in black, is the undertaker. And then George, who is in blue and like a blue denim shirt and jeans, is the gravedigger. But then you have Paul there, and he's got all the differences. So he's walking out of step from the rest of them. He's barefoot. He's smoking, and he's got the cigarette pointing down. That apparently means something. The no shoes thing is supposedly or the barefoot thing is supposedly a sign of mourning in Sicily. And the other big thing is that everybody's like, well, he's got the cigarette in his right hand, and Paul is left-handed.
Yeah, but the camera's on that side. They had to.
I know. Well, that's what I was. That was my thing. I'm like, well, yeah, if he held it in his left hand, it would be hidden. But and then perhaps one of the biggest parts of this whole album cover is if you see that Volkswagen Bug in the background there. If you were able to zoom in, I know I'm not asking you to, Alan, but because you're not going to be able to. But if you were able to zoom in onto or I guess you kind of can, onto the license plate there, it says 28IF. Or everybody was thinking 28 if, which to them was Paul McCartney would be 28 if he was still alive. When in reality, He was alive. He was right there in the picture, and he was 27. So,
Whoops.
yeah, oops, somebody messed up on that one. Somebody didn't know math.
Well, I think what they tried to do after that is they tried to like salvage it by saying, well, he would be in his 28th year of life.
Which nobody refers to you. Like when someone's like, how old are you? You're not like, I'm in the 28th year of my life. You just say you're 27. So
Because I guess your zero is zero. Like that's really your first year is zero.
yeah, and nobody asks you at that age. Nobody, I mean, if they ask your parents are like, he's 2 months. You don't.
He's in his first year of life.
It's in his first year. So he's 1 year old? No. He's a month.
That would be his second year.
Hey, who is this dude and these people? Hmm?
There are people watching the funeral. I'm just kidding. I made that up. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like a
Yep,
good thing.
that's right.
So, I'm coming to the end here, but we still haven't talked about one of the most important things here. And that is, who in the crap is Billy Sears? Is Billy Sears a real person? Because
Shears.
I can...
Sears.
Sorry, not Sears. Billy
I was like, Billy Sears is the guy who founded Sears, the store.
Sears the store. Because Billy Shears does have... Billy Shears does have a connection to the Beatles. Sorry, you guys talked over me. So
they talked about Sears. So go ahead and just roll on through.
Billy Shears does have a connection to the Beatles. And it's shown in the song Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So if you go to that song, we look at the lyrics. And we're going to go down towards the end. And I'll just read the lyrics to you. And it's not a very long song. The whole song lasts 2 minutes. And it says, I don't really want to stop the show, but I thought you might like to know that the singer's going to sing a song and he wants you all to sing along. So let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So they introduced Billy Shears before the world knew Billy Shears. So you're like, but then everybody was like, well, that's them introducing Billy Shears, who's not Paul McCartney. But the reality of it is Trav, do you know who sang? Do you know what song comes after that in the album?
Hang on, I do, because it's like it blends into it. What
does.
would you do if I sang? A little help from my friends, right?
Yeah. So at the end of that song, they kind of all chant, like they do like a couple of in unison saying, Billy Shears.
Yeah.
And it goes in to a little help from my friends. Paul McCartney and John Lennon wrote that. That was a mixture between John McClane and John Lennon. Die Hard, John McClane. So they wrote that song for one of the other band members, and who ends up starting that song, and which is Ringo Starr. So they wrote that song for Ringo to be the lead singer. And they introduce him in the previous song that here's Billy Shears, and then he starts singing. To top that off, in 1977, John Lennon, of course this is after the band was all gone, John Lennon wrote a song for Ringo Starr that they sang together, and it's called I'm the Greatest. And if you listen to that song as you get towards the end as well, the lyrics say, and Ringo's singing this, he says, I looked in the mirror, I saw my wife and kids, and you know what they told me, I was great. Yes, my name is Billy Shears. You know it has been for so many years. Now I'm only 32, and all I want to do is boogaloo.
Genius. Lyrical genius, that man.
So there's a lot of just people wanting to see and hear what they want to believe. And I don't know why Ringo's name is Billy Shears, but they had alter egos and things like that. They all pretended they were different people. One of them, isn't Paul McCartney the Walrus? Or
Yeah,
something?
it's debated.
It's debated, but whatever. I mean, most of their albums were super out of there anyway. I mean, so...
Well, I think with Sgt. Pepper, too, the whole point of the album was that you were kind of an album within an album. Like, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is this kind of fictional band that exists in this world they've kind of created for their songs. So when they introduce Billy Shears, they're just introducing the lead singer of their fictional band that they've created. They're not actually saying that this is a real band. These are real people necessarily.
Yeah. And one of the things that I saw and read is that, I mean, these guys, apart from how it all ended, were really good friends. I mean, throughout their career, and they did the same things that we do. Danny, we give you a hard time for everything.
Yeah, we started that conspiracy that Alan was dead that one year. We kept telling everyone he was dead and stuff. Hit a bunch of clues in our homework in high school.
I mean, when they wrote, apparently, when they wrote Little Help from My Friends for Ringo Starr, it was mixed with a bunch of like sexual innuendos and things like that you don't necessarily see or hear when you're singing it, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but if you look into it deep enough, then yeah. And that was from Paul McCartney's mouth, not anybody. That wasn't like a theory. And it's just, they just wrote stuff and thought it was funny. I guess the first line was supposed to be, "What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and throw tomatoes at me?" Instead of, "Would you stand up and walk out on me?" And Ringo refused to sing it because he was like, "They're gonna throw tomatoes at me."
I don't blame him for that.
So they just were having fun, and they make up stuff, and they create this world. Billy Shears is one of them. Alan.
So who is Sergeant Pepper's?
Sergeant Pepper. Oh, go Trav.
Please.
I don't really know.
I mean, Sgt. Pepper's is nobody. It's a fictional band made up within the album. It's just the name of the album was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And like, that's the people
of the fake band's lead singer.
Billy Shears was the lead singer of the fake band.
I mean, if you see on the cover, they're actually the Sgt. Pepper's cover, you have the Beatles, the four, but then you also have the 60s Beatles, or early 60s Beatles, over off to the side on the left-hand side of the cover. And they're all kind of looking sad and somber in their black suits and their mop tops. And I think it's sort of just, to me, it's more of it was more of like this idea of the Beatles transitioning from that sort of like poppy 60s type of tune into what became more of their like artsy fartsy, which are still actually great songs, but more like, you know, kind of druggy songs, and that kind of transition. But, you know, I don't know. So they're not a real band, though.
Yeah, but there you have it. That's a conspiracy of Paul McCartney is dead. Oh, yes. Did we get to your question?
So my question was not quite answered, having to do with Billy Shears. So, okay, so let's say, not even hypothetically, let's say more than likely, yes, they came up, they were great friends, they decided, hey, let's do this fun album, we're going to call it Sgt. Pepper's. It's going to be the name of this fake band that we're going to portray, and we're going to have our lead singer be named Billy Shears. At this point, do they remember that the lookalike contest was won by a man named Billy Shears?
It was never won by a man named Billy Shears. Nobody won that contest. The only reason why Billy Shears is associated with that contest is the fact that Number one, the big conspiracy stuff all started by Americans. And and they knew about that and said, and that just made sense. They were doing a lookalike contest. They probably found him, and it's Billy Shears.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, all of this stuff, everything up to Abbey Road was already there before somebody said, hey, listen to this backwards.
So that might answer my question then for the big reveal was going to be, because I really took it as Billy Shears was an actual person. And if the whole idea is that Billy Shears just stepped in, took Paul McCartney's place once he passed away, I was going to say, like, well, did Billy Shears just disappear off the face of the planet, like on the day that Paul McCartney died? And like, wouldn't there be some dude that's like, I'm still here, like
where's Billy?
Yeah, like, so I thought I could debunk it that way and just be like, dude, like Billy Shears is like 83 years old right now. He has 14 children and 197 grandchildren or whatever, you know.
But how many kids are each of those children having? His 14 children is 197 grandchildren. They each having 20?
I don't know, what's the math? If you take 197 divided by 14, you're looking at what, like about 14 each themselves.
Yeah, that's a lot of kids still for him to have. I also appreciate that you thought you maybe had cracked this whole mystery wide open. Well, I will tell you one thing they never thought about. What happened to Billy Shears, huh? Remember that guy? Maybe if someone had done a deep dive into that, we'd now know.
Yeah, Billy Shears is a fictional. I know, I'm sure there's somebody really named Billy Shears, but this Billy Shears was a fictional person that was it was actually Ringo Starr. And was Ringo Starr his real name?
I doubt it. I don't
think
know.
it
I
was.
probably was Richard or something like that.
Yeah.
Like he was born, parents were like, he looks like a Ringo.
He looks like a Ringo.
Looks like a Ringo. He was Richard Starkley. That was his name.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, I was about to look it up.
So, Trav, you went through all your stuff, right?
Yes.
I just had a couple other interesting things. Do you mind if I just mention them?
Go for it. Unless it's going to be another half hour.
No,
I know what this is.
That, Al, if you'll bring up the pictures again really quick. So I don't know if you guys saw anything on this, but they had another album cover. Bring up the one that's the Magical Mystery Tour album. Right there.
The Magical Mystery Tour.
Are you going to talk about the phone number?
Yeah, so apparently the Beatles written in stars at the top there, which is kind of hard to see from this picture. But at the very top, it says Beatles and stars. But apparently what people are trying to say is, like, you can make out a phone number out of that. So if you flip back to the previous picture, I think it was, Alan, you can see where people are trying to show you that you could either make a phone number of 5371438 or 2317438, or, you know, but like there's like tons of different ones. If you could zoom into that, Alan, a little bit, that you could make out. And so here's the thing though. And then they said, if you called the number that you could make out in here, even though it was a bunch of different numbers, that Billy Shears would answer the phone. So
I do love how, like, the 4, and I know people who are listening can't see this, but the 4 that's overlapping the A just is leaving off a whole chunk of A that they're just ignoring outright. That they're just, like, some of them you're like, okay, like, I could kind of see how you might get a 3 out of an E and a 2 out of an S. But then there's, like, the 4, and it's like, well, you're just ignoring a whole chunk of A to get that 4. Like, just leaving off a whole big thing of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, like, people were just making all different numbers. I mean, there wasn't even like one number that like everyone could decide on. Is like, yeah, that looks like that number and is hidden in there. It's just like all these different numbers, but apparently no matter which of these numbers you called, Billy Shears would answer the phone, who I will admit at the time when I saw this, I thought Billy Shears was a real person. So I just thought this poor man was just getting all these prank phone calls. And he's like,
I already told you kids, I'm not Paul McCartney.
So yeah, you really have to just think about this all. Like, I mean, really and truly, there is a lot here. And I don't want to say that John, George, and Ringo aren't smart guys. But are you really giving them all this credit? That they figured out how to say things in their songs, that when you play them backwards, that they say certain things, and that when you put mirrors up to some of their stuff in their album covers, that it reflects different, these sayings, and it's just a lot.
Well, and you have to remember too that the Beatles, they did the music, but they weren't necessarily the ones. I mean, they approved and helped design their albums, but they had graphic designers and illustrators who were putting these things together. They had record producers who were mixing these things. So they would have to be like, oh yeah, I want that A to look a little bit like a 4. They're like, what? Why? I just don't think that if it looks a bit like a 4, it might be a phone number. What? What do you need this for? Don't worry about it. It's just the way I want to write the album title, okay? It would have come up somewhere else.
So, Alan, if you move over, go forward a couple of slides. These are just a couple of other little things that, I mean, these
I was gonna also say, I was also going to say, so if you are the Beatles and you don't want anyone to know that Paul McCartney died, why would you even create hints?
Because the idea was that they felt guilty about it, and they wanted to tell people that they covered it up, but couldn't do it outright, so they hid everything in hidden messages in their albums and music.
That was going to be one of my big questions for you at the end. So,
Wait,
but if you go forward a couple of slides, excuse me, losing my voice apparently. So, apparently they did an album called Yesterday and Today. So here's one of the 2 album covers that they had for this album. But if you look in the box or the chest or whatever it is, that's Paul McCartney. Man, I'm really losing my voice. Excuse me. But what they would do is they would turn this album sideways, and then they would say, look, Paul McCartney's in a coffin. So that was their way of saying that was one of the hidden messages.
I've never seen
this one.
somebody in a
This doesn't even make
cross-legged before.
You what?
It doesn't.
I've never seen a body in a coffin sitting cross-legged before.
This wouldn't even make sense though, because according to my quick Google search, this album was released on June 20th, 1966. So that would be 4 months before he died. So unless they're really thinking ahead, you get a larger conspiracy that they murdered him, maybe, but you definitely aren't going to get.
That was one of the huge.
Why do I have to be in the book?
For this album was that it came out before his death was even supposedly occurred. And then if you go to the next one, it's the same album but a different cover, I guess. And this one is a picture of the Beatles covered in meat and baby heads and body parts. And apparently this was supposed to symbolize what Paul McCartney's body looked like after the accident. Like his head is severed.
Yay, that's morbid.
He has
his
like
body turned into
his
a
gut everywhere.
body.
Why is that? What was that up?
His body just turned into a baby's body in the accident.
Again, well, I mean, they couldn't be super straightforward about it, so I guess this is the way they covered it up, is to show this. But again, like Trav M said, this album came out before he even supposedly died. And then this is one other thing. This was just completely ridiculous, and I don't know if this guy is being serious or not. But I watched this quick. It was like a 2, maybe 3-minute video, and it's this dude who's like, yeah, I never believed. I did this report on Paul McCartney's dead when I was in elementary school, but I never really believed it. But now I found new evidence that made me change my mind. So if you go back to the first picture of the man holding the phone now, first picture, he says that this picture was taken of the Beatles in 1963. And if you look at Paul McCartney, he's the one in the white suit. He says, you can see Paul McCartney appears to be slightly taller than John, who's to his right. And so he's like, he looks to be about 1 inch taller than John. Then he says, look at this picture taken 5 years later in 1968.
I think you have those two flipped, by the way.
No.
This would be 63.
This is legit what he said. Like,
well, I know,
And
but this
is wrong.
But this photo we're looking at right now is 1963. The other one's 1968. I mean, about like.
So he said, look, suddenly in this picture, 5 years later, Paul is now like a foot taller than John.
Which one's Paul? This one?
Yeah.
He's on a platform.
Yeah.
That's what I said. So my point is, both photos, you can't see anything below their waist. So we don't know if they're standing on something, sitting, doing whatever. And two, I was going to point out the fact that you just pointed out, Trav, that picture looks like they're younger than the picture before it that was supposed to be taken 5 years before. So
I mean, this is definitely the picture from the 63, and the other one's definitely the picture from 68. Because
I'll put a link in the show notes to this video, so if anybody wants to watch it, they can watch it. But yeah, that's exactly what he goes through. Is like, this picture was taken in 63, and he showed the picture when they're older, and then this picture was taken in 68, and he shows the picture when they're younger.
I also, by this logic, this picture right here, Paul is like a foot and a half taller than George. He's like Paul was like a foot and a half taller. He was 6'9", and then suddenly a few years later he's 5'10". I don't know. You tell me. What happened to that extra foot?
Yeah, ridiculous. Basically, is what it comes down to. But it also kind of just proves our whole thing that we've been talking about, in the fact that people will, if you look hard enough, you'll find what you want.
Exactly.
And they want to believe this man clearly wants to believe it so much that he just ignores time and logic in height. Like,
has no belief in podiums.
He says it like dead serious, but I don't know if he's like, in a way, I'm like, he has to be joking, right? Like, no one could really be saying this and like telling people that this picture was taken 5 years after, when they're obviously a lot younger in the second picture than the first picture. And there's no sense of like, they're not all standing flush on the ground that you can see or something like that. So
no, it's clearly Paul is standing on something. He's not freaking Detlef Schrempf.
But like Trav said, in the end, with a lot of conspiracies, but this one in particular, if you want to see something, if you want to hear something, like all the records being played backwards that sound like all like the Trav Mydell mentioned, the ghost EVPs, that you cannot hear a thing until they tell you what you're supposed to be hearing. And then you're like, oh, okay, I kind of make that out. But only because you're thinking about it. But it's like, if you look outside, have you ever looked outside and said, hey, look at those clouds up there. That cloud looks like, and I could be like, it looks like a turtle. And my wife could be like, no, to me it looks like a Volkswagen. And Trav could be like, no, to me it looks like a guitar. Like, we could all see different things, just like we can see different things. Like, if you look at the stripes of a tiger. Tigers have all.
Wait, you're going into another analogy?
Daddy.
You said it was an
It
analogy.
reminds me of
You guys, he's spiraling. He's analogy spiraling. He's going to keep going deeper into the new analogies.
the stripes of a tiger remind me of this article I read about a person that saw a tiger in the woods and called the police, and then 10 armed men and a helicopter showed up to find out where this tiger was. Thought it was a statue the whole time.
Okay.
Challenge accepted.
As we end this, I'll tell you what that was all about. and
forgot
we were
about it.
debating on talking about like what our intro question would be, and Danny read an article about this tiger, and we said, well, maybe we should go with something a little bit more that
Has to do with your.
has to do with the topic. And I said, here, how about this? If you can find any way to bring the tiger up in the episode, I will let you mention it. And he sure did. Mission accomplished. So, well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. I thought it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed these conspiracies. We're going to wrap it up next week with Danny here with his. Again, we will keep it a secret, so maybe you come back.
Ooh, what could it be?
Just to kind of figure out what it is. But anyway,
I'll
so
give you
we
guys,
will.
for any listeners or watchers out there, and it's not like a super direct hint, and it's not meant to be racist, but it's just going to be ding, 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 ding.
It's that.
We'll
Not
see.
sure how that hint applies, but it
Were
does
you
have
trying
a.
to do yeah?
Sure, however you want to do it.
So
I think when you have to say it's not supposed to be racist, you probably just shouldn't say what you're about to say.
yeah, because it'll inevitably be racist.
Not supposed to be racist, but I don't think black people should be able to go to the same school as white people. Anyway.
And that's how that started. So, but thanks again, everybody, for listening. And make sure to visit us on our social media pages and our website. And rate us 5 stars if you like it. If not, just, keep not rating us. And we'll be okay with that. But anyway, check us out next week for our wrap-up of these conspiracies. Peace out, fools.
Goodbye.